Hey, everybody. My name is Minda Harts. Welcome to another live episode of Secure the Seat, your weekly podcast that helps women of color and our allies and other leaders who are in the workplace with us secure their seat at the table and help us while we're at the table. And so I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you who show up every week, because you could be anywhere outside or on the internet and you show up with us every Monday at noon and you watch the pre-recording. So for those who watch us on LinkedIn primarily, and then on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, thank you so much. Make sure that as we're talking today, hit us up in the chat. This isn't just the conversation that I have along with my guests, but we also want to make sure that you are connected inside of the chat and have a community in which you can express and say amen and all the things that you want. If it's your first time joining us, welcome to the show. We hope that you're part of the family and that you'll come back again. But how was your weekend? Drop it in the chat. Let us know if you did anything fun, what brought you joy. I know that we all work extremely hard during the week, so I hope that you did something that brought you joy. We're in a new month. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? I can't believe that we're in October. It just seems wild to me, but I'm happy that we're here. That means that we're still here, we're still breathing, and we get another opportunity to secure our seat in whatever that means for you. But one of the things that I want us to continue to talk about, and as you can see over the last couple shows, there's been a theme of sorts. But if you know any of the work that I do, I can't do anything without talking about race. And I believe that you can't have an equitable workplace that's not willing to talk about race, point blank, period. And so for today's guest, I wore, my camouflage, my green, because we're going to talk about some topics that have been uncomfortable for many, but many of us have been waiting to talk about it. We just may not always know the how part of how we talk about it. Or if we talk about it, then if somebody, says something that's not leading the conversation in a good direction, how do we respond to those things? And so I'm so excited to have Kwame Christian on today, who is actually, I have to shout out my brother, Stephen A. Hart, who connected us in the first place. And it's just been great to watch Kwame. He is a best-selling author. This is not his first rodeo. He is an executive. He's a speaker. And today we're going to talk about his new book, How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race, because let's be honest, all of us experience, race in the workplace, but we don't always know how to speak about it from, a person of color, and sometimes from our management and our allies' perspective. So without further ado, we're going to bring Kwame to the stage. Hey, Kwame, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me, Minda.
Happy. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now, for those who may not be familiar with your work, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I am the founder and CEO of the American Negotiation Institute. We have negotiation and conflict resolution trainings. We also have podcasts, Negotiate Anything. So I'm a fellow podcaster, keeping super busy, husband, father of two. Those are the most important people in my life. And that's where I practice the most negotiations, if I'm being completely honest.
Hey, that part. So we will drop Kwame's information in the chat, so make sure that you pick up that book. But I have to ask the big question, Kwame. Why should we talk about race at work? Let's start there.
Yeah, it's a great question, Minda, and let me tell you a bit of a story. So for me, when I was writing this book, I'm in love with the psychology of human interaction. I want to just get straight to it. I want to start off the book by saying, hey, this is how you negotiate on this topic, right? And so the publishers were saying, no. We have to tell people why to have the conversation. And so this is a chapter, like the chapter 1, just answers that question, why we should have the conversation. And Minda, it was the hardest chapter to write. First of all, it was hard because it was late in the process and I didn't want to write anymore. That's a big part of it. But second of all, it seemed really obvious to me, but I couldn't articulate it. And other people had that same problem. And after spending weeks thinking about it, it came down to one word, and that word is care. We have these conversations because we care. We care about our colleagues at work and making sure that we're creating a just and equitable environment within the organization. We care about progress. We care about justice. We care about making things better. And because we care, then we have to have these conversations, because the conversations are the catalyst to actual movement.
I don't know if you know this, but that was a tambourine moment, Kwame. Can you repeat that last line for the people in the back?
Yes, the conversations are a catalyst for the change that we want to see. And I think that's where people often miss, like they miss it, because we understand that we have to create positive change. But then how do we do it? How do we do it? It has to start with these conversations. And Minda, one of the things that people often miss is that they think about the difficult conversations as we need to persuade the people who don't understand the problems. And that's going to be part of it. But we don't stop and realize that we're going to have difficult conversations about race with people who are the same race as us, with people who are on our same team, with allies and advocates who are trying to move in the same direction. We're going to have tough conversations around this subject matter in an incredibly diverse array of conversations. So it's really important for all of us to be prepared.
I'm glad you bring that up, Kwame, because I've had various conversations with people who look just like you and me, difficult conversations about race where we don't sit at the same side of the table on the matters. And so this isn't just, a quote unquote black and white issue. This is a conversation that we all have to be able to have, right?
100%. And that's the thing. When we're talking about race, no matter what race you are or anything like that, it's a sensitive topic. It's a super sensitive topic. And that's what makes it so tough. It triggers a lot of emotionality, whoever's in the conversation. And so we have to have a methodology, a framework, an approach for these conversations so we can have them more effectively.
That part. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about in the workplace, we always used to hear, and you still hear it to some degree today, don't talk about race, don't talk about politics, and don't talk about religion. But the reality is we have to talk about some of these things at the workplace, and you have to talk about race because we all sit at different intersections and you can't ignore it. That's why we have the issues that we have now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, think about this. Let's give an example. I'm here I'm recording from home today. And there was a couple weeks ago, there was some flooding like in the basement. So there were some puddles there. It's uncomfortable. I'd rather not deal with that. And so you know what I didn't do, Minda? I didn't avoid the conversation. I didn't say, you know what? I'm going to pretend like my foundation is fine and I'm not going to deal with it. Do I want to deal with those problems? No. But if I want to make my house better and functional, I'm going to have to. And it's really interesting because a lot of people use the ostrich technique for dealing with these problems. We just put our heads in the sand, pretend it's not there, and then hope everything gets better by magic. But we have to go through this uncomfortable process of communicating with each other on these issues if we want to make things better.
I love that so much because essentially the working place is a house that many of us reside in for many hours out of our day, many days out of the week. And if we're not willing to address those leaks, those areas for puddles, all those sorts of things, then it's just our foundation is going to deteriorate. I love that.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. If we're going to spend most of our waking hours at work during the prime of our lives, and I think it's reasonable to try to make these workplaces someplace where we would actually enjoy or at least tolerate, and we're not going to get there without having these tough conversations. And the thing that's most frustrating about this is that a lot of times it's going to not just fall on the shoulders of allies in general, but people of color to have these conversations. And one of the things that I've realized is that there's a reluctance because people will say, well, I shouldn't have to be the person to have this conversation. It is not fair for me to be the person to have the conversation. And I 100% agree that it's not fair. And at the same time, I also realize that if not you, then who? And I think we have to recognize that we have the power to have these conversations and create the positive change. And even though it's not fair, if we want to move things forward, sometimes we have to put something greater than ourselves.
Amen. Well put. Again, we'll drop the link I know you're already chomping at the bit if you don't have the book already, How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. We'll drop the links in the chat so you can get that in your cart. And while you're at it, tag somebody on LinkedIn right now, because I'm sure that you know somebody who could benefit from this conversation, a few somebodies. So make sure that you tag them and share the replay that will be on YouTube after our conversation. But Kwame, so we're talking about difficult conversations. I was told that you have a new book out, which you do, and we're talking about it today. And you discuss how we create a culture in our company in which people aren't afraid to have these conversations. Can you give us a few tools on how we create this culture?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like a one-trick pony here, but through negotiation, that's how we do it. And I think one of the things we have to do is get alignment on what that means. So for me, when I think about negotiation, it's any conversation that we have where somebody in the conversation wants something. And so when you look at it through that lens, we're negotiating all the time. And I think what we have to do is we have to renegotiate the rules of engagement at our workplaces. If it doesn't break any physical laws, then it is subject to change. And a lot of times when we think about who had a seat at the table when these rules were put into place, when these structures were put into place, a lot of times it's people who look like you and me. We weren't there. And so these organizations weren't built for people who look like you and me. So now that we're entering into a new stage of diversity, and we have a more diverse workplace, and we want to truly make it inclusive, then we have to have a really hard look at ourselves as an organization and see what needs to change in order for us to create that future that we want to see. And so again, it comes down to negotiation. We have to figure out where we are and be very objective and honest about that. And then we need to paint a very clear picture of where we want to be. And then we have to negotiate as to how we're going to make that happen.
I love that. I never considered talking about race a form of negotiation. Can you dig a little bit more into that?
Oh, yes, I can. Yeah. So here's the thing. When we think about these conversations, I want to respect the topic for sure, because yes, talking about race is very, very important. And yes, when you think about these sensitive issues, race, gender, politics, whatever it happens to be, those are going to trigger higher levels of emotionality, no doubt. But at the end of the day, it's one of the many issues that we have to wrestle with within the workplace. So here's an example. So we're going to have conversations at work where finance is going to come up, where money is going to be relevant. We're going to have times where personnel is going to be relevant, team chemistry is going to be relevant, and there are also going to be times where race is going to be relevant, right? When we're talking about issues of inclusivity, when we're talking about people feeling as though they belong, when we're talking about maybe, for example, a marketing campaign, oh, that doesn't resonate with the Black community or the Asian community or whatever it happens to be. There are going to be times where it's relevant. And so I want to respect the topic while at the same time making it clear that this is something that will come up organically from time to time. And it's just going to be one of the many issues that we're going to have to negotiate day to day in the workplace. So there are going to be days when it is relevant. Let's talk about it. There are going to be days when it's not relevant. Then we might not need to talk about it. And then there are going to be a lot of these tricky conversations where somebody in the conversation believes it is relevant, and there's going to be a conversation where somebody believes it's not relevant. This turns into a conversation about race because now we need to talk about whether or not it's relevant, right? And so I think we just have to recognize this is going to be one of those conversations that comes up. And if we layer in this methodology of negotiation and conflict resolution to those conversations, then we can be a lot more strategic with the way that we have those conversations.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And something that you said makes me think about another question I want to ask you is, what do you do when you make a mistake? Because we know that people are going to make mistakes about how we talk about it, when we bring it up, right? And how can one handle when we do bring it up and have those conversations, but we're met with someone who does not want to talk about it right now, right? Or
Yes.
is it based off of what you just said?
Yeah. So I have a unique approach. So when there's a section in my book where I say you're probably not making enough mistakes. And so here's what I mean. I'm not giving people a license to be reckless or negligent and go about offending everybody intentionally. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying is that a lot of times we don't make mistakes because we're not trying. We don't make mistakes because we're not venturing out of our circle and we're not talking to people who think differently or look different from us. And so the thing is, if you spend enough time with any human being, no matter the race, you will for sure offend them. No doubt. Like that's just a quirk of human interaction. And so we can't let that fear hold us back. And we have to recognize when we do make mistakes, we can recover. And that's a skill. That's a conversational skill. And it's called apology. But there's a way to do this. There's an appropriate way to do this. And a lot of times it just hinges on the word if versus then. So let me give an example. If I'm having a conversation with you, Minda, and I say something offensive, and I say, Minda, I'm sorry if what I said offended you, versus Minda, I'm sorry that's what I said offended you, we understand that one is better than the other. And it's funny. I was in a presentation one time and there was a husband and wife in the presentation, and I gave that example. And I said, so which one is better? And the wife said, that is better. And the husband said, if is better. I was like, oh, bro, you're off. You're off. And she's like, thank you. I've been telling him this for years. Because essentially, what are we saying? If we have that conditionality with our apology, what we're saying is that, hey, listen, what I said was completely above board, and I'm sorry that you are so fragile that it caused harm, right? And we're calling into question the legitimacy of their emotions. That, not surprisingly, makes things worse. Okay. And so I think really what we have to do is we have to own it and just acknowledge the fact that we have made a mistake. We might have overlooked something. It's not an indictment of your morality or who you are as a person. It's just recognizing that there was a failure. Let's own it and let's vow to do better in the future. And we can't do better without each other, because a lot of times these mistakes happen because of a blind spot. And the person who was hurt can now help that person on their journey to get better when it comes to these interactions.
Ooh, I love that so much, because I'm a firm believer. It's not what you say, but how you say it. And one of my biggest pet peeves, Kwame, is when someone says, I'm sorry if that offended you. It's like, did you not hear that it did? Not if.
Right. Exactly. No, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. So owning that, and I love that so much. The other thing that I would say, I don't know if you hear that. Mike, okay, I'm not sure if you heard it on your end, but I love this so much. The book is called How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. Add it to your toolkit, call your local library, add it to the book club at your organization, because we can't get to an equitable workplace without talking about race, gender, identity. Like, all of these things are not going anywhere, right?
That's right. And if they are going somewhere, if they disappear, then we have other problems, Minda, other bigger problems. So I'm with you. And when I think about this book, I want people to read it and recognize that this is a book about how to have difficult conversations about sensitive issues. You could swap out race, put in something else, and you could still use those fundamental methodologies to have the conversation. And I think it's just so important for people to have a clear framework, so they're not going into these conversations freestyling. They actually have a plan and they can handle the conversation when it comes up.
That's a great point. And I love that you said you can input anything in there. And I think one of the biggest tools, at least, I teach at NYU Wagner. And one of the things in my course I always say is we do a module on difficult conversations, because it's so important that you don't shy away from these things. These things are going to happen. We're complex individuals, so we're not always going to see things from the same perspective. But can we move this situation forward, or are we making it worse, right? And having the tools to be able to talk about race, to talk about gender, to talk about identity, religion, whatever the quote unquote taboo topics that whoever deemed to be taboo, but yet and at the same token, they're saying bring your authentic self to work, right? So if I'm going to bring my race to work, but bring my gender, my religion, or identity, then I need people on the other end to know how to talk about it too, as well as myself. So thank you for writing this book. Is there any final thoughts or things that we didn't talk about that you just want to highlight for those who are like, you know what, I'm tired of talking about race, because you're going to have those people, right, Kwame?
Yeah. Listen, I'm tired of talking about race. I've been writing this book for years. I'm ready to be done. But it doesn't change the fact that I have a responsibility and I want to make things better. And I have to do what I have to do. And if you want to make things better, same thing applies to you as well. And I'll leave you with this. We have a framework called the Compassionate Curiosity Framework. You could use this for the external conversation with the other person, but also internally as a tool of introspection and emotion management. And so it's 3 steps. First, you acknowledge and validate emotions. Second, you get curious with compassion. And then third, you use joint problem solving. And it's a flexible tool that can serve as the foundation for your difficult conversations, because it addresses the emotional issue up front. It gives you a framework for asking questions with a compassionate tone. And then at the end of the day, you work together to try to figure out what you can do with the other party to make sure that we're making the world and your organization a better place. It's a problem-solving tool, but having that framework gives you the confidence to actually operate smoothly and confidently during the conversation.
giving us all these tools on a good Monday, Kwame. Thank you. And I think that's the kind of rub for me, is that I think people, at the end of the day, I think people want to talk about these things. They don't know how. And so they're like, oh, I'm scared, so I'm not going to do it at all. And so I think having a book like yours on, here's the tools on how you do this, how you engage, right? And I hope that everybody will purchase the book today, because it's so important that you're not going to not have difficult conversations in the workplace. So when you have to have them, having the right tools, the right words, the right language to be able to assist you and help you and guide you is going to be clutch.
Absolutely. And I encourage readers to read it with a friend, read it in a book club. It's designed for that. It has discussion questions at the end because I want it to be practical. And so I want you to be able to read a chapter, put it into practice immediately. It's not an intellectual exercise. I actually want people to do things, like have the conversation. That's what makes this matter.
Also, Kwame, I could talk to you about this all day, because, you know, this is the work that we like to do. But I have to ask you, as a lover of grits and rap lyrics, A, do you eat grits, and how do you like your grits?
Okay. So I am, I'm a Caribbean American. All right. So grits, I'm a more of a cornmeal porridge kind of guy, but I like my grits, a little bit of sugar. I like it sweet, but unless it's shrimp and grits, of course.
So with that said, Kwame, I guess my next book may have to be, how do we have difficult conversations about people who like to eat grits with sugar? Because that was the wrong answer, my brother.
Listen, I thought we were trying to be inclusive here. You know, I'm trying to be my authentic self and bring a little sweetness to the conversation. You hit me with some spice. You know, I can handle it.
All here, all grits eaters. I might judge a little bit, but I'm going to continue to read your book so that I know how to talk about these difficult conversations. I appreciate you. But one of the things that I love with a good bowl of grits, or maybe in your case, porridge, is a good rap lyric. What's one of your favorite rap lyrics, and why?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this one a lot, actually. It's I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. And I have to remember that when I think about managing my personal brand. It's because, yes, the American Negotiation Institute is its own standalone company. We have staff, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, as the leader, like me, myself, I am a major part of that business. And it's been an interesting transition, moving from Kwame Christian, the friendly husband and father, to Kwame Christian, the, using air quotes, like the influencer, and recognizing how people see me in that way. And so just recognizing that the way that I carry myself is going to be seen a little bit differently, given the new status. So it comes with a higher level of responsibility. And then I'll give you a little bonus too, being inclusive. My favorite reggae lyric ever, Bob Marley: emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds.
What's one tip that you would leave everyone on how to make the workplace better than they found it?
Negotiate. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but negotiate. I believe that the best things in life are on the other side of difficult conversations. And I believe a lot of times we avoid those difficult conversations because we put our comfort over progress. And so we have to lean in, have those tough conversations, and advocate for ourselves. Because when you look around and there's nobody advocating for the things that matter to you, then it's your responsibility to step up and have that conversation. Mic
drop. I wholeheartedly agree, and I appreciate that. Kwame, it's been such a pleasure having you. I know it was fast and furious, but any final thoughts as people are, I'm sure they're watching us right now, they're going inside Amazon, they're going wherever they like to buy their favorite books and getting it. But again, it's called How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. Just any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, this would be a great opportunity for me to like plug the podcast, plug the book, but I'm going to take this opportunity to give you your flowers, Minda, because what you've done with this platform is really, really impressive. And I think for you being in your position, waking up every day, being Minda Harts, you might not realize just how profoundly significant your impact is. So just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I don't think I do think that way every day. And it was funny that you say that, because over the weekend I had this moment where I just thought to myself, wow, 4 years ago, I was sitting in my old workplace, feeling desperate, hopeless, all of the things, right? And where I get to sit in the seat that I sit now, it's only because of God's grace and me not seeing what was on the other side of that table. right? As you said, Kwame. So, thank you for reminding me. Thank you for saying those kind of things. And now I want you to plug the podcast and the other thing.
All right. Thank you. So yes, so I'm big on LinkedIn. I post something every single day. So check me out there. Also check out the podcasts, plural. We have Negotiate Anything. It's the #1 negotiation podcast in the world. Over 600 episodes, listeners in over 180 different countries, and over 6 million downloads now. We have Negotiate Real Change, which helps people who are leaders put these negotiation principles and tools into action within their workplaces to create a better environment for everybody. And then lastly, we have a Spanish language negotiation podcast, Negociación desde Cero. And if you're interested in negotiation, conflict resolution, or any DEI types of trainings, reach out on LinkedIn or check out the AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com.
We love to see it, and I like that. So you're bilingual too.
Yes. And it's funny. I'm very confident speaking in English, but the nerves from young Kwame come right back when I'm speaking in Spanish. So I don't promote it very often.
I love it. Well, thank you, Kwame, for how you're showing up, how you're using your voice, how you're using your influence and your thought leadership to make the workplace and spaces that we inhabit better than they found it. So everybody go pick up How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. Thanks, Kwame.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So break it down. What's our new affirmation for the month?
Affirmation of the month is I am not too proud to ask for help. A lot of people think it's great to be the superhero all the time, or the superwoman or Superman. It's amazing to be depended on, but sometimes you just have to ask for help, and it's not a bad thing. We coin phrases like pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, and sometimes you got to push yourself and do all these sort of things. But a lot of times I believe God just wants us to ask for help. Ask for, if you need help in a certain area, one of the greatest things you can do is open up your mouth and ask for it. We can take a lot of pressure off of ourselves by simply maybe outsourcing a task, or doing something a little earlier in the day, or not pushing off certain work. Sometimes we have to ask for help. You don't have to feel guilty asking for help. You don't have to feel bad. You don't have to feel like you're less of a person, or you're a bad CEO, or a bad boss, or a bad employee. Ask for help and watch the stress go away. I know it's simple, but please ask for help. That's actually number 297 in my book, Affirmation 372 Affirmations by Mike Hartz. Is asking for help. I think that's one of the big things that we don't do, and it relieves so much pressure off us, Minda.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you let us know that, because we're in October. We have a few months left in the year. Who do you need to ask? What help do you need, right? I know people often say, oh, I'm self-made. Nobody's self-made. There was somebody who helped on that journey. And I think that it's important that we normalize asking for help. Asking for help is not a form of weakness. It's actually a form of self-care. And so I hope you all will think about what that looks like. Now, we're not saying be dependent on somebody else. We're not saying to be sucking the energy out of everyone by asking every single minute for some help. We're asking to be conscious, but don't think that you have to hold everything in, that you have to do everything on your own. I used to be one of those people who felt like I had to do everything by themselves, and I was crawling to bed at night because I could have solved it by asking for some support. And once I started to do that, I was able to look a lot younger and not as stressed out, and I was actually able to create more space for myself. So thank you for that, Mike. And where can people pick up the affirmations?
It's everywhere where you buy or listen to books, on Audible, and also on my website, MikeHartz.com. Also, to add to that, Minda, people want to help. People really want to help you. There's people who are out there that want to support you. They're simply waiting for you to ask.
Absolutely. Again, we appreciate you showing up every week, joining us on Secure the Seat Live. Make sure that you share it with somebody, and we'll see you next week. Keep securing your seat.